these books were very addictive. Some of the stuff that they would say, I just physically would cringe. I'm just like, ew, no. I'm like tearing up thinking about it. It left me feeling like a shell afterwards. Hello my lovelies, welcome back. My name is Speedy for those of you who are new here. Oh my god. Cue my dog scratching himself. And here he comes. Guest appearance. Okay, we have just started this video and he has already joined us. It's like he knows that this setup is me recording. Anyway, oh boy, monthly reading wrap. Y'all know what you click. I'm going to be reviewing all of the books I read for April, which is quite a good amount. Grab a drink, get cozy, and let's get started with this video. Okay, Tareen, are you gonna stay on my lap the whole time? Anyway, the drink for today is of course an Alani, and this is the Don't make fun of me. I have never been able to pronounce this word, okay? Sherbet swirl is this one. I'm going to need it to get through these reviews because we are going to be reviewing a lot of books, and this is going to act as my pre-workout for later. So let's crack it open. I like this one. Oh, I like this one a lot. It tastes like the ice cream. That aside, let's talk about books. In total, this month, I picked up 12 books and I read 11 of those books. One was a DNF. And out of those 11 books, 5 of them were on my Kindle. The rest of them were physical format, and I cannot remember all of the books that I had audiobook help with. So we're going to assume that I had audiobook help for some of these books. Remember how I said I want to give more elaborate reading wraps? I want to review my books with a little bit more flourish to them, basically. I want to talk more about like the plot, the characters, the writing style, all of that. I just kept reading and I kept putting off my book reviews. So these book reviews are all vibes. I'm sorry. And to add on to that, I wrote my book reviews, but I didn't script my video at all. So we're going to wing it. I guess I'm not ready. I'm not prepared. I'm sorry. What can I say? It was a busy month. So let's start off with our first book that we picked up, which actually I'm going to talk about as a series because I picked up the first 3 books in the series, which is Psycho Shifters, Psycho Fae, and Psycho Beasts by Jasmine Mas. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I read 11 books this month, because I binge read the first 3 books of the Cruel Shifterverse series. So for the sake of time and to not repeat myself too much, we're gonna just talk about the first 3 books together. So this story, the series, follows our main character Sadie, who is an orphan and has a younger sister, and they live in this world where there are shifters, hence the Shifterverse. They have 3 different categories, right? Humans, which are known as gnolls. They have the alphas, which are the people who are able to shift. And then they have the omegas, who also get to shift, but they shift into smaller animals. Cats, bunnies, stuff like that, right? And they are the only ones that are able to reproduce with an alpha. They're very coveted. That's kind of like a little bit of the system, a little bit of the world. So it follows our main character Sadie, who grew up in this abusive household, and eventually when she turned 20, and she's basically forced to test her blood, even though she this whole time believed she was a gnoll, a human, but it turns out she's actually an alpha. So when they find out that Sadie's an alpha, the person that went to go test her takes her to the war front that's happening, because the alphas basically are the ones that are leading the war. They're like the ones in charge, not the ones who created the war, but the ones in charge of the soldiers, basically. So she's dropped into this area where she meets 3 other alphas, Jax, Cobra, and Asher. And basically it's just a story that follows Sadie and her adventures, her learning to be an alpha, learning to work with these 3 other alphas, even though they kind of like don't like her, they don't trust her, but they're also extremely attracted to her because... And then it turns out she's also the very first female alpha in this world. The first 3 books follow Sadie throughout her adventures, and that's all I'm going to say about that because I can't get into explicits of book 2 and 3 because it will spoil things, but it does follow Sadie and the 3 alphas and other characters. And this is a wide choose, so Jax, Cobra, and Asher are all potential love interests who are trying to get at Sadie. Cobra and Jax are into each other and stuff stuff like that, right? It's a spicy, romantic-y kind of book. I don't know if it's the first thing that Jasmine Mess wrote, but this is the same author that wrote Blood of Hercules, and it definitely has that same feel, that like bully romance, that white choose aspect, the abused girl that grows into a stronger character who grows into her powers and stuff like that. So it follows that same formatting. Talking on writing style, I knew going into this book, into this first book, that this was some of her earlier work. So I knew this was going to be a little bit less polished compared to Blood of Hercules. And I compared it to Wattpad, like reading Wattpad books, like when I was a teenager. Take that as you will. I liked it. I like my moments of reading Wattpad books. It was a very fun time when I was in high school. So when I read a book like that, when I'm an adult and I'm aware of it, I enjoy myself. It feels a little bit nostalgic. So yeah, I'm not expecting anything exceptional with the writing, but these books were very addictive. As soon as I finished the first one, which I finished it like at nighttime, I immediately started the second one and then went straight to a third one. Now, for characters, of course, we have our white choose, we have Cobra, Jax, and Asher, who I will primarily talk about, and we also have Sadie. Sadie was a fun character in the first book, and in the second book, I was kind of like, you're getting a little bit on my nerves. By the third book, I was kind of like done with her. I just couldn't. There was a lot of like push and pull in the third book, and there was like the whole like other woman trope, which I'm usually not a fan of and stuff like that. Between Sadie's behavior and the different things that they were going through in the third book, I was just kind of like,
I'm not really a fan anymore
of this specific storyline at the moment. But I will say book 3 closes Sadie's storyline, so it's like a 2-part series. The first 3 follow Sadie and her group, and then the second 3 follow another person, which I'm not going to say who because it will spoil, but we do meet this person in the beginning. I do want to go back to reading those books, but I feel like because I binged the first 3, by the time that I got to the third book, I was kind of annoyed by Sadie because I had been reading about Sadie for the past 5-6 days. In conclusion, Sadie was fun until until I really couldn't take any more of her character. For the love interest, I feel like in the first book, I really liked Jax, because even though this is a bully romance and I knew I was getting into a bully romance, Jax was the only like kind character, and it gave such sweet moments between Jax and Sadie, and I really appreciated that. It was like a good contrast. So I think that's why I really grew to like Jax. Book 2, and I will say maybe even book 3, Cobra made it up there. I knew I was going to be into Cobra because he's usually my type of like book boyfriend, right? He's broody, he has like dark features, he is the one that really was bullying her too. I knew I was really going to enjoy Cobra, but at least in the first book, Jax was definitely who I was like cheering on, and then Cobra for the next 2. And then honestly, I think Jax and Cobra, and I think that's why I also really like Jax, because Jax and Cobra together make so much sense. But yeah, Asher's okay. I was never fully convinced for Asher. Overall, this book really was just all vibes. It was very addicting. Like I said, I couldn't put them down. I did rate these books separately. Book 1, I gave it a 3. Book 2, I gave it a 3. And book 3, I gave it a 2.5. Because again, I was just tired by then. I'm just like, okay, this is getting dragged on. And then for spice, I feel like as the series progressed, the books got spicier. So book 1 was kind of spicy, but it wasn't like anything too out there. So I'm going to say like a 2.5. And then book 2 was about a 3 because there were more explicit acts happening throughout the book. And then book 4 is where it did get more spicy, but still I don't feel like it was too out there, so I'm going to say a 3 for that one as well. But yeah, that is the Cruel Shifterverse. Fun time, fun vibes. I have to go pee, so I'll be right back. So after allowing my brain to rest and not really think too much about what I was reading, I picked up Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, and this is one of my favorite classics. It's not my favorite classics, but it's one of the ones that I did read quite a bit. I read in high school and then I reread a few times as an adult. I really enjoy the story, and I picked it up again because we were reading this book for my in-person book club. Like I said, this is a favorite classic of mine, so I did rate this 5 stars. I feel like I've had this rating for quite a while now, and I don't really see myself changing it anytime soon. I'm so excited to talk about this book because as we all know, a new film was released. I feel like every time this book comes up in like pop culture, a lot of the misconception that this book has is that this is a romance book, and I'm a very strong believer that this is not a romance book. Let's talk about what this book is about. This story follows multiple characters. We have Heathcliff, we have Catherine, we have Edgar, we have Hindley, and we'll keep it at that. So we have multiple characters. So this story basically starts with Mr. Lockwood, who is not really a character I just talked about, but Mr. Lockwood, who comes and stays at this house called Thrushcross Grange, and basically decides to go and like see who is staying at Wuthering Heights, who's supposed to be his landlord. Shows up unannounced and meets interesting characters. He has like a really bad first impression and ends up going back to Thrushcross Grange, and the maid there, Nellie, basically ends up telling him the story of Wuthering Heights, which basically is a complicated story between Heathcliff, Hindley, Edgar, and Catherine. I'm not gonna go too much into detail. I feel like you can go and see the Cliff Notes version, but to summarize it sweet and short, this story basically follows terrible people who do terrible things, all in the name for revenge. Personally, for me, not a romance story. There are romantic moments, but it is not necessarily a romance story, which is why I feel like the story is so fun. It touches topics on like generational trauma. It talks about prejudice and like misogynistic ideals, and it was a very progressive story for its time. I believe it also received a lot of criticism when it first came out. So like I said, there are some very romantic moments. The writing is very beautiful. I feel like some of the dialogue between Heathcliff and Catherine usually is what gets taken out of context and like quoted constantly, and it makes it feel so romantic. One of my favorite quotes of all time. Let me read it to you all. This is Heathcliff talking to Catherine. "Kiss me again. Don't let me see your eyes. I forgive what you have done to me. I love my murderer, but yours, how can I?" And it's just moments like that, phrases like that, when they're just talking to each other, that can be so romantic, but can be very misleading when you have absolutely no context of what's going on in the story. Yes, it is very beautiful writing, and yes, it has so many topics for discourse that makes this book, I feel like, a fun book to read for a book club. When you are reading the story, character-wise, there are so many characters, and honestly, I feel like the one like neutral character would be Nellie and Lockwood, because they are the narrators of the story. And honestly, Nellie needed to get paid more because she put up with a lot. Girl did not get paid enough. You want a moment of redemption for Heathcliff. You want to see that underdog thrive and grow as a person, but all of these people are just so it isn't until the very end, and even then the characters that we are left with at the end, there's also not that great either. But that's because they went through so much trauma of their own due to generational trauma, due to cycles, because of like revenge. It's a very interesting story, very interesting concepts. I would definitely recommend giving it a try. I feel like it's something that could be very fun to discuss with people. Now after that, I needed something a little bit easier to consume, and I'm just like,
I got a dark romance that is waiting for me.
So I picked up Mine by A.K. Rose. This is one of those books where I don't know what I was thinking. I feel like the only reason I finished this book is because I was able to get the audiobook on Libby, so it helped me finish the book. But I had gotten to a point of
maybe this will get better.
That was not the case for me, so I ended up giving this 2 stars. And as for spice, this was quite a spicy book from the very start, so I'm going to say a 3.5. I feel like this was my fault though. I feel like if I would have read the synopsis, if I would have read the back of the book, I would have not been surprised. And I need to start reading the back of books. I just like to go in blind, but I really need to start reading the back of books. Like I said, I did listen to this on audiobook for a bit, but I had the physical format, so I read most of it, and like the last 20-30% I was doing like immersive reading. This story follows Wright. Her whole life was thrown into shambles. Her dad got arrested and her childhood home burned away with all of her belongings, so now she's staying with a friend. This friend of her mom's seems to have some kind of connection with her mom, some kind of like romantic connection. This friend also just happened to have lost his wife. He has 3 kids, and those 3 kids are grieving their mom, and seeing these 2 women come into their lives after just losing their mom, they're not taking it very well. So these 3 brothers basically are just kind of like,
we don't want her here.
Especially the youngest one is dead set to trying to kick Wright and her mom out of the house. But after all, this is a dark romance, so of course there is a relationship between her and the three brothers. It is a white choose, think kind of like Credence story path. And you know what? I'm not gonna lie, I liked Credence. I really did enjoy reading that book. I feel like if I would have known the taboo of the story going in, I probably would have been a little bit better about it, but I didn't, and that's my fault. Let's talk about why I wasn't a huge fan. It was very cringy dialogue from the very start. Some of the stuff that they would say, I just physically would cringe. I'm just like, ew, no. I had secondhand embarrassment. And like literally, I think it was the third chapter in, some spicy stuff happens, and it's dual POV, so we get to see the youngest brother, I don't even remember his name, the youngest brother's POV, and then sometimes we'll see like the other brother's POV as well, but it's mostly like Wright and like the youngest sibling. Very cringy dialogue, and I think that's what was one of the reasons why I just couldn't get through the book without the audiobook help. And even then, it was hard to listen to it because it was even cringier. It did read a little bit like a Wattpad book. With Psycho Shifter, I was fine with it. I enjoyed that kind of writing style for that kind of book. But for this kind of book, when it's like a dark romance with like a taboo subject to it, I'm just not here for it. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of like a very common plot on Wattpad. The FMC, her house burns down and she moves in with her crush, or she moves in with One Direction, or she moves in with like Harry Styles specifically. This was a very, very common trope. And in this case, in order to like make it, you know, not teenagers, obviously it was like 18 plus. So the girl was 18, and something that really bugged me was that they constantly were talking about how young she was. It was uncomfortable because they were like making that so known. It's just like,
oh, I'm so innocent, I wear this innocent clothes.
She was still in high school too, and so like they really emphasized that she was young. The youngest sibling was, I believe, like 1 or 2 years older, and then the other ones, I don't remember how much older they were, but they were a little bit older. And so that's what did make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, was just the emphasis of how young she was and how young they saw her and still kind of pursued. So yeah, it was just uncomfortable for me. I did finish it. I feel like I should have left it alone so then I didn't have to rate it or review it, but I finished it. That was on me. I could have chose to like stop reading it. I think the other reason why I wasn't a huge fan was because the main character herself, was very inconsistent. I didn't know if we liked the mom. I didn't know if we hated her. I really did not like the mom, but then she was defending her mom. It was very wishy-washy, so because of that, I felt like a unreliable narrator, and that just made it a little bit more difficult to follow the story. And then eventually towards the end, we get into this like secret society kind of stuff that happens. I don't know if that's a spoiler, but I'm just like, what? It's safe to say I'm not going to continue reading the story. I went in thinking this was a mafia romance, and I was waiting for that mafia romance, and this was not a mafia romance. This was a stepbrother's plural, stepsister, because this is a white choose romance. Mine by A.K. Rose, 2 stars. So after that flop of a book, I went in and took a big chance, but I knew I was going to enjoy this book to a certain extent because I love this author. I picked up The Night We Met by Abby Jimenez. I did do a reading vlog for this book specifically. If y'all want to go see more of my reactions, I go a little bit more into detail about what I think about that book. We're going to keep it very summarized for the next 2-3 books. I did read this in physical format. I had no audiobook help for this one. This one was another one of those books where I actually knew what I was getting myself into, but I was a little bit nervous because we were reading about tropes and plots that I am not a fan of. That is love triangle, that is emotional cheating, physical cheating, that is I can't remember what the other trope was. Point is, emotional cheating and physical cheating books, I'm not a fan, right? And I knew we were going to get to a line of emotional cheating because Abby Jimenez talked about this in one of her interviews, so I knew I was getting myself into that kind of story. Camera's gonna die. Hold on. Be right back. I was hesitant, but if anyone was going to make me like a book about emotional cheating, it's Miss Abby Jimenez, because I love everything she writes. So I did rate this book a 4 out of 5, and as for spice, it was a fade to black moment. There wasn't anything explicitly stated. There was some chemistry, but nothing too out there. So I'm going to say a 0.5. Just so you can have an idea of what the story is about, this book follows Larissa, our female main character, who who happens to meet the perfect man. They have so many things in common. There's just so much chemistry between them. But it turns out that this guy actually is her boyfriend's best friend. The night that she met Mike, her boyfriend, was also the night that she met Chris, the best friend. The only reason why Larissa ended up with Mike and not with Chris is due to first impressions. Larissa just thought that Chris was inconvenienced by her needing a ride home, and so she ended up choosing Mike to take her home instead of Chris. It follows the story between Mike, Chris, and Larissa and the complications of being in a love triangle and being in a relationship. Like I said, I was very hesitant going into this book, but I actually ended up liking this book a lot, and it might have been because of the author, because I really do like her writing. I feel like she has a very simple way of writing, but it's very beautiful. I feel like a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the quotes that come out of these books can be very heartwarming, and it just reads throughout the book like that. I feel like lately, especially, even though her forte of writing is romance, I feel like she hasn't been writing contemporary romances like she used to. If anything, her books are starting to read more like literary fiction, with the core plot still being romance. I feel like this book definitely focuses a lot more on character and character development. And yes, the chemistry and romance between the characters, but we are very much digging deep into these characters and learning more about them. And I feel like that's very helpful when reading such a complex story like this one. And something that Abby Jimenez did with her characters here is that she really humanized Sadie, Mike, and Chris. Because they are so humanized, they are also humanly flawed. They're not perfect. We're not going to see the perfect man. Even when Chris was one of like the nicest guys out there, unbelievably fictionally perfect, he also had a lot of imperfections. Sometimes I just wanted Chris to sit down and talk with Mike and kind of just be more upfront with things. One of the things I don't like about books where there's a cheating trope is that usually the person that gets cheated on is villainized. They either don't care about the relationship, there's a reason why someone cheats, and usually almost put the blame on the person that gets cheated on, and I'm not a fan of that. In this case, I feel like that didn't necessarily happen. It did to a certain extent, but I feel like everyone kind of took accountability of their own actions. I really did enjoy that while we didn't really see the aftermath of everything, we got to see the friendship that eventually turned into like love and like a relationship between Chris and Larissa. There was obviously a lot of yearning. This is a little bit more of a complex story. It has a bit of a forbidden aspect to it, so it felt like a slow burn in that sense, because we didn't see the couple get together till the very end, and we didn't linger on the aftermath as much, which is something that I would have liked to see. But also, I know that's not the point of the story. The story isn't about them being together and then dealing with everything that happens after that. The story is about them getting together. So I really did like the story. I enjoyed it. I had my moments where I got upset. I had my moments where it made me emotional, and I was happy. I was giddy. It had its sweet spots. It elicited a lot of emotions from me, which I appreciate when a book does that, because it just makes it a lot more immersive. So I did like it. I liked it a lot. A 4 out of 5 for me. So continuing on this reading blog, I decided to pick up my other book club book. This is for an online book club, and this is the book that I picked up and I DNF'd. So this is Daggermouth by H.M. Wolf. So Daggermouth by H.M. Wolf. Since I did DNF this, I am not going to go into too much detail. Y'all can go see that reading blog. I talk a lot more about it. Just like a very small summary. This is something that you can read in the back of the book. But this story basically is a dystopian dark romance. Our female main character is tasked to assassinate our male main character, and she ends up not being able to accomplish this, but because she saw the face of this guy, and that's basically very forbidden in their society, she's forced to marry him. So that's just kind of like the gist of the story, right? Or at least that's the start of the plot. I don't know the rest of it. I think I DNF'd it at 40%. I was very excited for this book. I'm not gonna lie. I was very interested in this book because everyone was talking about it, and it's hard to talk about these books when they're so popular, because if you're in that small group that doesn't like it, you feel like you're wrong. And that's how I feel right now. I think for me, a major part of it was that there was a big plot hole that I just could not get over. And maybe if I continued to read it, I would have. But it was the whole forced marriage. It didn't make sense because in the society that they're in, it's such an issue for the female main character and the male main character to even be together, because other people in their world, if they're from different groups and get together, they are killed for it. And these people are forced to marry instead. So it just didn't make sense to me. It really didn't. Maybe later on again in the future it would have, but I could not oversee how like there was no standing ground for this plot in my eyes. Aside from that, I couldn't connect with the characters and I just couldn't really get into the book. It took me a really long time to get into the book, and once I did, it took me right out when we got into the forced marriage part of it all, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I can't. If this is for you, I'm so happy for you. I'm glad you liked it. Personally, for me, not a fan. So after that, I really didn't feel like reading, even though I wanted to read something, but I was falling into a reading slump because the book that I had just read was not it. And I'm just like,
oh, but I want to read.
So I picked up a book that I knew would get me back into reading, and that's Wanted by the Alien Warden by Ursa Dax. This is part of the Cowboy Colony Mail Order Brides series. I've talked about this book before. I really like these books. These are alien romance books. They're short, they're sweet, they're fluffy. I rated this book a 4 out of 5 with a spice of a 2 out of 5. Just to give a quick summary of the series and the book specifically. The series itself is about a program where human women volunteer to be brides for these aliens who are in a penal planet, but the women don't actually know that these aliens are convicts and were convicted of murder, but because they were too young to fulfill their sentence, they basically just dumped them in this isolated planet that is overseen by different wardens. We have followed already 3 couples in this series. We are in our 4th one, and this one isn't actually about the convicts. This one's about the warden and the liaison basically of the program, so the human women that sends the women to this planet. Tasha, the human liaison, the woman, ends up finding out that these are like convicted felons, and she freaks out obviously because this was kept secret from the humans, and decides to go to the planet to make sure that the human women are okay. She decides to stop the program and makes a visit, and then when she realizes that the women are happy, in order for her to continue the program and feel good about the fact that she's sending women up there, she decides that she's going to visit the rest of the convicts that are signing up for the program to make sure that they are good men, good alien men, good alien males. 10, Warden 10 is the one that takes Tasha around, and it's a story about the Warden and Tasha, and it is so freaking cute. I love these stories. They're so easy to read. They're so like simple and straightforward. And I love that when I am looking for a book to get me out of a reading slump. There's no beating around the bush. Everyone's very upfront about how they feel. And if they're not, it's very much resolved quickly. It has its very sweet moments. There's very nice banter between the characters. There's a lot of yearning and pining for each other. And it's just cute. It's very fast paced because the books are usually less than 300 pages. So they tend to be a little bit shorter. If you're into like alien romances, similar to Ice Planet Barbarians, which is the one that I usually compare it to because it's the most known one, this is something like that. It's just not as spicy as those books. Nothing explicit happens until towards the end of the book. This is usually very consistent with the other books that I've read so far. I'm only in book 4. A very fun book, all vibes. That's usually how I feel like when I read this book, and they always make me happy and giddy after I'm done reading it, and it just always makes me want to continue the series. So the book I picked up after that was The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. Oh my god. This is the final book to the trilogy of the Poppy War. This was everything I thought it was going to be. This was a 5 out of 5. And I will say from the very start, just like the rest of the series, Trigger warnings for this one. Content warning. It is a lot of heavy stuff. This story, this series, after all, is about war. But this series, wow, I've been talking about the series for my past few reading wraps. I finally finished it, and I knew that when I picked up this book, I was going to be devastated, and I was just kind of left feeling very sad. And hold on, I specifically described it as feeling like there was no color left in the world. I knew what was coming. That's the thing, because there's only one way this story could end, and yet when it did happen, I'm just like, okay. Like I said, this story is a story about war, about politics. It's R.F. Kuang. We all know at this point that R.F. Kuang is one of my favorite authors. I trust her so much, even when I know she's going to break my heart. But I trust that she will tell me a good story, even if it's hard to get through. So we'll just go straight into the rest of the review. I can't really talk about what this book is about because, again, major spoilers for the other two books if I do. So as I've mentioned before, I feel like one of the things that brings this book to life, this series to life, is the attention to detail. It is a very immersive story. It is very political, heavy on ideologies and like religion and prejudice, misogyny, racism, oppression. I feel like one of the big things it touches on is just the consequences of war and the consequences of oppression, because we follow our main character Rin, and seeing her fall into paranoia and like just everything ending in like such a tragic and epic way. Again, I saw this coming. I didn't know the details. You kind of know. You just know by like the second book, you're aware of what's going to happen. Like it can only end one way. And it just hurts because like Rin went from being used as a weapon by a regime and then went to another regime that tried to dismantle her due to their own ideologies. I just want some peace for Rin, and I feel like she'll finally have that. And Kitai, oh my god, Kitai, I love Kitai. Oh my god, I'm just thinking about everything that happens literally in the last third of the book. Seeing how much book I had left and seeing that basically it felt like the book was over, I'm just like,
oh my god, my heart.
I'm like tearing up thinking about it. It left me feeling like a shell afterwards. It's one of those books that I feel like it's going to turn into a classic. It very much feels like it's had an impact in literature, and that's honestly really cool that this series, these stories might be memorialized as classics at some point. This might just be a personal opinion of me. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I just feel like it's just one of those books. It's so cool. So we're just gonna leave it at that. This was a 5 out of 5, and I can rate the whole series now, and this is a 5 out of 5 series. Even if the first book was not a 5 out of 5 for me, the series itself is one of those books that it's a must read if you can stomach those kind of topics. But it's definitely a must read. After that, I needed something fluffy, so I specifically left a cute little spicy, cozy romantasy for me because I knew I was going to need it afterwards. So I ended up picking, oh sorry, my back. I ended up picking A Rivalry of Hearts by Tesnosha Odette. This is one of those anticipated spring books that I had on my list. It wasn't necessarily a spring book, but it felt cute and cozy, and it was exactly what I need. So I ended up rating this a 4 out of 5, and as for spiciness, I'm going to say 3 out of 5 because there was more emphasis on but it wasn't overly spicy either. But we had spicier moments. Yeah, I'm gonna say a 3 out of 5 because it was spicier than a usual romance book, but it wasn't overly spicy to be 3.5 or a 4. So I'm gonna say a 3. I did read this in physical format and listen to this on audiobook. This story follows our main character Edwina, who is a human that ends up going to Fairy Wave, and she came from the human world, Britain. So yeah, she ends up going to Fairy Wave for a book tour because she's actually a very popular author in Fairy Wave, and she ends up getting late to her book tour due to things that were completely out of her control. She realizes that she's now sharing her book tour with a fairy author, William. They are now both in competition for this 3-book contract. One night on their tour, they're out for drinks. They're talking about being good authors and like who can seduce their readers better and stuff like that, when suddenly they make a deal between each other, a bet between each other, to see who can seduce more people. Whoever seduces more people will win the contract. And the way they would win it is one of them would step down so the other person could take the contract. It's just this cute, spicy, romantic story between William and Edwina. and it's very low stakes. It's a very fun vibe. I really liked reading it. I feel like the characters, Edwina, she was a little bit scattered. A lot of things would happen to her that would make her a little bit clumsy, but she was very persistent. She knew what she wanted. She was very driven and had her eyes on the prize. I think my only complaint with Edwina was that because she is like a female author in this new place, it would have been very nice for her to compete based on her own merit from the beginning. So I just really wanted her to do that, but she was very stubborn, and she knew that because she was 2 weeks late into the tour, if this was all based off how many books she sold, she was already behind. So I understand why she wasn't taking that chance. And then we had William. William was fun. He was this sexy kind of like poet. He would have his poet persona, and then he had his like own personality outside of that. Eventually, of course, this is a romance story at the end of the day, they kind of start catching feelings for each other, and it's just fun. It's such a fun vibe. And I think one of my favorite things about this book, about William specifically, was that even though there was a bet in place, William always felt like a gentleman throughout the whole book. He was like always looking out for Edwina, always like trying to take care of her. When he did realize he had feelings, he wasn't like trying to actively pursue other people, and it was just so much fun. We did have like that dual POV. Since the whole plot was based off who could seduce more, obviously there was a lot more like spiciness, not necessarily with each other all the time. We had more than your usual vanilla scenes for sure. Edwina was not only using this bet as a chance to like win the contract, but as a chance to like experience and learn more and like figure out how to like write more scenes for her books. So it was just fun. Overall, it was a fun vibe. I liked it. I was looking for something to vibe with after such a heavy book that I was reading. I really liked the side characters as well, Monty and Daphne, and I'm so excited to read their story. I'm very interested to read more by this author for sure. Enough of that. Let's move on to our next book. So at this point, surprise, surprise, I finished my full April TBR and I had nothing else to read except the books I had at home. And since I had read like a spicy book, I was feeling something a little bit more not fictional, basically. I was in between a thriller or a memoir, and I finally picked up a book that was recommended to me by my friend almost a year ago, and that's Educated by Tara Westover. This is a memoir, and since it is a memoir, I started implementing this rule for myself where I do not rate memoirs, not because I don't think they're good, but because I feel weird rating someone's life. I could rate it based off their writing skills and stuff like that, but still it feels weird, especially when we're reading about traumatic stuff that happens to someone, saying like,
oh, this was the 5 stars. I'm sorry you went through that trauma, but it was such a good book to write about it.
I don't know, memoirs feel very conflicting to me for that exact reason, that this is someone's life. They're putting their life up for criticism, yes, but I don't want to rate someone's life. With that long-winded explanation, let's talk about Educated. This book is a memoir. It's the life story of Tara Westover, who was the daughter of a survivalist. I'm being blinded by the reflection of a car right now. She grew up very isolated from other people in a small town. She grew up religious, right? She was Mormon, and she grew up with her priority being to stay off the grid, avoid the government, and survive, learn how to survive off the land. Hold on. Oh my, wait, hold on. My neighbor just parked. His car was reflecting the sun onto my face, so we moved. We scooched. No problem. Here we are. Tara basically grew up with this fear of something will happen, the end of days are going to come, and the only way to survive it is by being ready. It just follows her story of like growing up and how she eventually wanted to pursue an education and how that went, and her relationship between like her dad and her siblings and how she navigated all of that. So it has topics of mental health, it has topics of religion, and topics of education. This could be a little bit of a triggering book for some people. I would definitely recommend looking up content warning. I don't know if it was just Tara Westover's writing. I don't know what it was about about this book, but I could not put it down. I started reading it in the morning and I didn't want to stop reading it, and because I got the book on Libby, I started listening to it while I was working, and since I didn't have any meetings, I literally listened to it almost the full 8 hours that I was working. And then after work, I started reading it again. So I like binge read this book and I finished it that same day. So I read this book in one day. I could not put it down. It was very, very interesting. I was definitely hooked. Like I said, there's a lot of topics for discussion, and I think one of the ones that really stood out to me, and that's just because I am very passionate about education and about people pursuing education and pursuing a higher education, because I feel like education helps with the development of critical thinking, and that's something that is very, very useful in life. I think that's one of the reasons why I kept reading it, because I found it very interesting to see someone who was encouraged to not go to school, how they went about pursuing education, and then after that a higher education, getting their PhD. One of the lines that stuck with me, it's not verbatim, but something that really just stuck with me when it came to this book, was how Tara mentioned what drives the curiosity to get educated, to learn things, is boredom. It just made me reflect on the current time that we're in. We don't allow ourselves to be bored. How a lot of people are talking about the younger generation not really having that much of an education, and that could be due to all of the technology access that we have. That's just a whole other discourse. But definitely one of the things that really stuck to me was just boredom driving the curiosity to learn. I thought that was very interesting because, yeah, I feel like it's true. When you're bored, what else do? You just seek to learn something to be able to occupy your mind. Yeah, like I said, this book also definitely touches on trauma and mental health and how that affects people, and the access to information revolving mental health, how much that affected people growing up, because mental health was not something that was discussed, honestly, not until even recently. It's just very interesting to see how a lot of us who are now adults, especially those who grew up in a time when mental health was really not a thing back then, how that really shaped them in life. And I feel like this book very much touches on that specifically as well. Tara Westover, like I said, has very amazing writing, and I was very much hooked. I know I've cut my video multiple times, but my camera's gonna die, and I have one book left to review. I don't want it to die mid-review, so let's change the battery. And so my final book that I picked up for April, literally the last 2 days of April, was The Last Vanish by Megan Miranda. This was a 3 out of 5 for me. This was a thriller, so I'm not going to give too much of a summary. Just know that this story follows our main character, Abigail, who lives in a small town where a lot of people tend to just disappear in a trail near the inn that she works in. I feel like this book is perfect for someone who's looking for a thriller that's not too dark, but it's not looking for a cozy thriller either. This has that sweet spot of mysterious, suspenseful without being overly dark, and sometimes has a little bit of a wholesome moment and wraps up pretty nicely, conveniently at the end. I will say this is my second book from Megan Miranda, and I don't know if this is talking too soon, but I am starting to notice a pattern with her writing. Her writing style is definitely not dark. It's not like Karen Slaughter, who can write very gruesome scenes. I feel like Megan Miranda does not really give you the details, but will still give you the story of what happens. I feel like the plot was a little bit more slow-paced personally, and usually, unless there's a build-up that we're looking forward to, I'm not a huge fan of slow-paced thrillers. I like to keep it moving, keep it going, because I want to know what's going to happen next. So this one definitely is a lot more slower paced. We're getting to know the characters a little bit more and the situation a little bit more. I've also noticed that Megan Miranda tends to like her red herrings, so there is a little bit of that, which helped with not knowing what was going to happen next. It might have been because I had no idea what the story was about going in, but I really wasn't sure where we were going with this story. I had my suspects, and there were a few twists that I was able to predict, but I was taken by surprise, which is always a brownie point for thrillers because I am very good at guessing them. So when something does take me by surprise, I'm just like,
Okay, good job.
I think I like the small town aspect, but that's because I like kind of like like the found family, small town trope usually in books, and this definitely had that. It was okay. I was satisfied. I wouldn't say this is my favorite thriller. I wouldn't say I'm never going to read anything from this author again. I was very much just satisfied. It held me over until I was able to get new books. I would recommend it if you're into a little bit more of a slow-paced thriller. Like I said, it's not a cozy thriller, but it's definitely not that dark. Up to you if you want to read it or not. But I had fun. I was satisfied. And this one I read in physical format, and I had a little bit of audiobook help for this one as well. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. That's it. We're done. We're done. Oh, I feel sleepy even though I literally just had an energy drink. Hold on, let me drink some water. We're done. Whew. 11 books, y'all. 12 books basically I talked about, but 11 books read. And here we are. I really have to make sure I keep up with my book reviews. I was not expecting to get through that many books, but I was very much in a reading mood, and here we are. Those are my books. That's it for this video. Let me know down in the comments below, what was your favorite book of the month? I think mine was definitely The Burning God. Oh my god. Oh, I'm forever gonna think about that series. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already and you would like to, please subscribe. I usually make book content, and now and then I make some lifestyle vlogs. But thank you all so much for watching. Have a beautiful day, a beautiful night, and happy reading. Bye.